I've never probably actually said this ever personally, like on an open platform.
Who is Tom Sellers?
It's a good question. Tom Sellers is a 2 Michelin-star chef, chef patron and owner of restaurants Story, Story Cellar and Dovetail. You know, I came from a working class background. I cooked in a Michelin-star restaurant before I ate in one.
Didn't you actually fail your cooking GCSE?
Yeah, but it's so funny, isn't it, how life can literally turn on its head.
You opened your first restaurant at the young age of 26.
You have to give everything you have for every hour you possibly can in order to do that. You work very hard, long hours, and if you don't reach that standard, you don't deserve to be in the environment. I became completely addicted to it.
Have you ever been taught a lesson and been thrown out the kitchen?
Yeah. I actually remember going home and I smashed up my room. I've never probably actually said this ever personally, like on an open platform.
Hi, I'm Abbey Clancy and welcome to Exhibit A. Today I will be chatting to twice Michelin-star chef and owner of my favourite restaurant, Tom Sellers.
Hi, Abs.
Hi.
I'm not nervous, I promise.
Well, we've literally just been talking for an hour before we...
It's a warm-up. It was a warm-up.
But to warm you up even more, I'm going to do a few quick fire.
Easy questions, hard questions?
Bit of both.
Okay.
Naughty or nice?
Oh, naughty.
Starter or dessert?
Starter.
Why?
You know, when you get into your 30s, it's harder to keep off the weight. So
yeah, totally know.
Less sugar.
Okay.
Probably why, being really honest.
How would you sum up your cooking style?
I think product-driven, intelligent. I think always ingredient-led. I think that's really important. You know, I think as a chef, what's really important is that you give the level of respect to what you're working with. I think over time, I've learned to... I think technique obviously is very important and you're learning in your craft, but I think it's about really understanding what you're working with and not overcomplicating things.
Mm-hmm. What's the biggest risk you've ever taken and what did you learn from it?
Biggest risk? I think probably opening my first restaurant at the age I did, obviously, and the amount of debt that I took on. I think if I had my time again, I probably would I do it again? I obviously knowing the outcome, I'd probably say yes, but actually with what I've been through over the years in business and in restaurants, it's definitely my biggest risk, I think. Because I think no matter how hard you work at yourself, there's so many factors that you can't control.
Who was the first person to believe in you?
Myself. I think it has to start with yourself. I think if you're looking for other sources of, you know, I think you can be inspired by lots of things, but I think if you're looking for a certain something or somebody to inspire you, then you're probably not in the right place.
Yeah.
I think for me, it has to start with you. I think I'd like to think any high performer or anyone that has been successful will tell you that, you know, the belief has to start from within. You know, I think for myself, you know, I had this stubbornness around wanting to succeed. I think it happened to be in the field that I'm in, obviously, but I think it going a bit deeper, it came from my upbringing and everything about that. And it was, I realized that I wanted to make the best out of my life I possibly could. And you have to have a huge amount of self-belief, even when you don't. I think it's working. You have to navigate that. I think there's been so many times where probably, you know, I still doubt myself today with certain things, but I think you almost have to push it away and like suppress it and be like, it's fine. Like believe in yourself, back yourself. Because ultimately to get a group of people to believe in you, it starts with you. So yeah, myself.
What are you most scared of?
You know, honestly, probably disappointing either myself or probably now my team. You know, over the years, my team has grown so much. And I've got a fantastic group of individuals that are all extremely talented, and I feel a huge amount of responsibility to them.
Yeah.
You know, and ultimately, the decisions day in, day out, particularly the top level ones, lie with me. Yeah, so myself, I think, and my team, my immediate team, I think that I have a huge responsibility. So, yeah.
Don't want to let them down.
Yeah, definitely.
So for those who don't, of course I know who you are, but for those who don't know who you are, who is Tom Sellers?
Who is Tom Sellers? Tom Sellers is a 2 Michelin-star chef, chef patron and owner of restaurant Story, Story Cellar, and Dovetail. In a nutshell.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's all I got really for you guys.
So let's start at the beginning. Paint me a picture of your childhood, your experience growing up.
My childhood was, I came from a working class background. My mother was a nurse. My father was a welder. Family of 5, so brother and sister. And, simple pleasures, my parents worked very hard. I grew up just on the outskirts of Nottingham. And had that normal, I guess what you call, honest upbringing, where it was about playing out of your mates in the street, misbehaving at school a little bit. Always was big growing up into playing sport, hanging out with my friends. Mum and dad worked a lot. And I'd say we made the best of what we had. My parents were big on that, They were very much about being grateful for what you have, understanding, I think, my dad was very big on work ethic and application, and my mum was very big on it as well. I've always said that I had really good parenting because I definitely wasn't the easiest child to...
Why? What did you do?
No, I just think, I just mischievous at times. I think, like any young boy would be, I think you make a few wrong decisions here or there. But my dad was a fairly strict man, so coming from that era of, disciplined in the right way and making sure that we understood what was right or wrong. But yeah, so I grew up, and then obviously education wasn't for me for sure. I didn't like the constraints of a classroom. That was pretty obvious from the beginning. As I got a little bit older into my teens, I realized that wasn't going to be my future. Definitely wasn't going to be down the route of education and A-levels or university. So
didn't you actually fail your cooking GCSE?
Yeah.
That's what I read. Is that true?
Yeah,
ironically,
it is actually true. The only GCSE I actually failed on paper was cooking. Yeah.
How funny.
Was home ec, they called it then,
home
right?
Ec.
Home ec.
I still love that.
And it's funny, isn't it? I basically took that class because it was basically like
a skive.
Yeah, literally, you could just skive off. It was
I did the same.
I used to come to my mum and be like, "Oh, mum, I need these ingredients for tomorrow." And she'd be like, "Thomas, are you for real?" Like you don't even think about then that she's got a full-time job.
Yeah.
She doesn't have half that stuff in the cupboard, all that kind of stuff. And I would just literally piss about in class, put flour in people's bags, not really listen, mess about with my mates.
Yeah, I did that.
Yeah, it was one of them. And it's so funny, isn't it, how life can literally turn on its head. And when I look at what I've honestly gone on to do in that industry, it's like to fail that in secondary school it's kind of funny.
Would your mum go cook?
If I was to say no, she would kill me. So, no, my mum was a good cook, in all honesty. I've always said I think my mum's the strongest woman I've ever met. We 3 children, full-time job, still came home every day, cooked a home-cooked meal, did her very best to. And I think that was just demonstrated who she was as a mum and the kind of home life she wanted to have. I always say that she used to get so angry when we wouldn't sit at the dinner table and eat.
Yeah.
And I think as an adolescent teenager, you want to eat in your bedroom or you want to sit in the lounge and eat, watch the TV. And my mum, even if, we got to that age where we just went and did that, she would still sit at the dinner table, even if it was on her own. And I look back now in hindsight and I realized that, food is really powerful in that way of bringing people together. And I think
100%.
She had 3 children and they were all doing their own thing. I was going to football. My brother was going over here. My sister was going to dance class, and such a busy life that actually the 30 minutes or hour we'd get was only when we sat down at the dinner table together as a family. And, I think she really loved that bit about food. And I love that now. I think about how food brings people together. And no, she was a good cook. She cooked that kind of food that gave you a hug at the same time, We were
home comforts.
Yeah, home comforts for sure. Cottage pie, things like this. But she would always cook and make the effort. And I think that that's obviously gone a long way.
You're in school, you failed your home ec.
Yeah.
Where did you go from there?
You know what it was? I think I always wanted money in my pocket as a kid. It was one of them. And, my parents, as I said, my father was like, if you want money, you got to go and work for it. And there's a local pub near me that had just had a revamp. And I literally went in and just started washing the dishes. I went in as a pot washer. And that very quickly turned into washing dishes to then washing dishes and I'll go and get this from the fridge for me.
Yeah.
Oh, can you just peel these potatoes? I remember learning how to make tomato fondue at the time, which was how you blanched them, peel them, diced them. I didn't know anything. And it was actually, it's funny, isn't it? When you look back in hindsight and you think about the small gifts that life gives you. There was a chef in the kitchen at the time. His name was Damien Clisby, amazing chef. He used to run Petersham Nurseries actually in London.
Oh yeah.
He'd moved out of London at the time. I think he'd come from Pied La Terre, the restaurant. For personal reasons, he wanted to get out of London for a break and he'd come and took the job at this pub. And I think he took a liking to me, as a young boy. And I remember he was like, right, tomorrow you need to come with a book and a pen and you're going to write everything down and I'm going to teach you the basics. And it just went from there really. And within 6 months, I completely fell in love with the environment of a kitchen and all of the things that meant. And I decided...
It's quite a tough environment, like a kitchen. It's volatile, fast-paced, long hours, unsociable hours.
And I think that's all the things that I fell in love with. I've always said that I fell in love with that before I fell in love with food. And I don't know if that's because, my dad had a certain way of bringing us up, which was like, you're going to understand what the real world is.
Tough love.
Yeah, absolutely tough love. And I just honestly, I remember telling my mum that I wanted to be a chef and I was going to basically drop everything to do that. I'll never forget it. I came home one night. I probably had about 2 pints of beer, and I was drunk. And I'll never forget, she was in the bathroom brushing her teeth, getting ready to go to bed. And I told her that I wanted to be a chef. And her honest answer was, she turned around to me and she said, what the fuck do you want to do that for?
Yeah.
And I think at the time, obviously we joke about it now. And I think that was just an educational piece. We weren't as a family highly educated on food.
Yeah.
We didn't know what a Michelin-starred restaurant was then. I always say I cooked in a Michelin-starred restaurant before I ate in one.
Yeah.
And, I think she probably thought that in what she knew of knowledge of that industry was that I'd end up working, long hours.
Yeah.
In a pub that probably didn't offer me much back.
Yeah.
And, we joke about it now, but I think my parents have been unbelievably supportive of my career and everything that I've done. And later on when I traveled with my career was so supportive. But, I think it's them little moments where obviously they gave me 100% support. And I just completely went headfirst into it from that moment onwards. And I very quickly after that left and moved to London.
Must have been so tough.
Yeah, I made many, many sacrifices over the years. I worked unbelievably long hours back then, and the industry's changed for the better now in that respect. But, I became completely addicted to it. Like genuinely.
What were you addicted to? Like
everything. I was addicted to being told I wasn't good enough because that happened a lot in elite kitchens. I was addicted to wanting to be better as a chef, wanting to understand more, addicted to the rush of service, addicted to the camaraderie at times, the hierarchy, the discipline, everything. I was completely consumed by it. And literally, I didn't even have enough money to go and get a beer if I wanted one. And I genuinely I've got 3 or 4 close friends that I grew up with that I still talk to. And we talk about it now, every now and then we'll reminisce. We've been fortunate enough to spend more time together recently and do some nice things together. And, we talk about them times and I literally just dropped off the face of the earth. I remember when I'd moved to New York, I remember when Facebook came out and, it was the only way that I could then really communicate with my friends properly. And yeah, I just went off and was like, I knew that if I wanted to achieve in this game, you know, I didn't even know what the outcome was going to be then. But I knew from the way my father had brought me up and playing sport at a fairly high level as a youngster was that you have to give everything if you're going to achieve. You can't cut any corners. You can't cheat the game. Yeah. And I was completely blinkered. Like, you know, there's that saying, you know, a racehorse when it wears blinders, so it can't be distracted by anything around it. It was very much that. I just had blinders on from a very early age. And I had this clear vision of that I was going to go and one day open my own restaurant. I decided that the moment I moved to London, and I remember when I moved to London, the first chef I worked for was a chef called Tom Akins in Elliston Street in Chelsea. He was a 2 Michelin-star chef. The kitchen was notoriously tough, and I was very green around the ears. And I remember my first week there, and I couldn't believe, number one, how physically tasking it was on my body. But I also couldn't believe his imagination with food, like, changed my life. I was like, you can literally do anything. And I was so turned on by it. Yeah. And then it didn't become a choice. Yes, I knew I was making sacrifices. Yes, I knew I wasn't seeing my friends. Yes, I know I wasn't going out on weekends.
But you're getting fulfilled.
I found fulfillment in such a different way. Yeah. And, you know, and I wouldn't change them years because they ultimately that's what shaped me and allowed me to later in my career when I went through tough times. You know, that's what really shaped me.
But how are you getting these jobs? You're 16, you moved to London. The only experience that you've got is working in a pub.
Yeah, I've always said, and I say it to people now that work with me, look, there's only 2 things in your life that you truly have control over. And that's your work effort and your attitude. And if you have them 2 things, anyone in the world will employ you. Or give you a chance. I believe that, you know, because everything else is learned. And the chef at the time in the pub who we mentioned earlier, he said, look, if you really want to excel in this, you've got to go to London. So where all the best restaurants are. Yeah. Remember, there wasn't social media at this time. Yeah. So I was like, okay. And he just wrote down two names, two restaurants. He said, they're the 2 best restaurants in London right now. I think I called them both up one day and said, I'm looking for a job. And they both just said, yeah, okay, come and do a trial and we'll offer you a job if you're good enough.
Oh my God.
And I went down. I remember my mum drove me down, booked a hotel for one night for me. She stayed with me for the 2 nights. And I worked in both restaurants for one day. They both offered me a job. And
what was your skill set at this point?
Pretty minimal.
Yeah.
You know, I knew the basics. Like,
you could chop an onion.
Yeah, but not... I wouldn't say to the level where it would blow anyone away, but I think what I'd learned was that I knew what kitchen behavior was then by this point. I knew how to move. I knew that you had to have high energy. You had to listen. Your peripherals had to be very good all the time, you know, and I just went in and gave 100% effort and 100% attitude. And I didn't realize at the time, I don't think, one, how tough the first kitchen I went to was going to be. And I think that when I went there, honestly, the first 6 months were actually a little bit about survival for myself. Yeah. You know, I was very young. It was tough. I was living on my own. You know, I had very little money. I had, of course, support from my parents, but I also wanted to support myself. So it wasn't, you know, I knew what I'd entered into by this point. But them 2 years in the first restaurant in London really shaped my career in terms of I knew when I left there, I could go and work anywhere in the world for sure. And like I said, yes, there were sacrifices being made, but I decided by that point what I wanted the end goal to be, and nothing was going to stop me. So
are you as willing to give like young kids who come to you that same opportunity and chance?
Yeah, if you know any. Yeah, no, of course.
I would love to come and work in your kitchen because my skills are minimal. I wanted to even ask you how to make a piece of steak without setting every fire alarm off in your house and having a black smoky kitchen.
We can do that. We can do that. No, I think, you know, look, things have changed slightly, and I do argue sometimes for the better or for worse, but Yeah, look, for me, I'm very much about still them core values. You know, we're always trying to recruit, and I believe in youth and I believe in young people. I think it's really important. I was very young when I set out off on my journey, and I think it's really important that we offer that in our industry. You know, it's such a fantastic industry, and I'd like to be at the forefront of the next generation. I think it is really important, and that they're educated properly around, you know, anyone that tells you that, like, if you want to succeed in anything, this idea of balance is bullshit. It doesn't exist.
I know.
And anyone that tells you it does is a liar. You know, and of course there are fundamental changes that have had to happen in all industries in the way that individuals should be treated. But in terms of like that output that you need to give to be elite, balance does not exist. You have to give everything you have for every hour you possibly can in order to do that.
And what advice would you give to someone on how to do that?
I've always said, I think the reason that the education system, and I don't want to run off on a tangent, but I've always said that the syllabus of education is flawed.
Yeah.
To a point, you know, obviously them fundamental years of learning to read and write and all of that stuff is obviously very, very important. But, you know, I think after that, like, teaching is the art of discovery, right? I ultimately made all the sacrifices I did and gave everything I wanted because I found something that I loved and was extremely passionate about. And I think that I didn't do it for any other reason than that. I didn't do it because I thought it was going to make me rich. I didn't do it because I thought it was going to make me famous.
Yeah.
I didn't do it because I did it because I loved it.
How important is your team to you, and how much do you rely on them? Like, how much are you actually cooking?
Yeah, so answer to the first part of the question is that the team are everything ultimately. You know, I can't be here today without my team. Yeah. You know, I try and be the best leader I can be and lead by example and give autonomy. And look, firstly, I've never asked someone to do something that I'm not prepared to do. Yeah. And I think that's really important. You know, I think that gets harder as you grow because, you know, I've got some individuals that have been with me 10 years still. And I think they really get it because they've seen me sleep on the restaurant floor. They've seen me clean the floor, clean the drains. Yeah. Like, so now that relationship's easy, but obviously I've got staff with me that have probably joined last week in one of my restaurants and they know a very different version of me. Yeah. So it's important that the environment and the principles within the environment are set. And that has to be done by my team. You know, ultimately that's the part of their growth. Yeah. And educating them in what we are trying to achieve and the culture that we're trying to set. But that's a huge challenge. And yeah, I struggled with it at times. I think, you know, I knew that I was talking to people that potentially had more life experience than me. Yeah. And were probably more emotionally mature than me at times. But I think because I was so hell-bent on my vision and had a huge amount of self-belief, even when I didn't have self-belief, if that makes sense, that it's hard not for that to rub off. Yeah. And have so much conviction, right? You know, I always say to particularly my senior members of my growing team of people is that, look, being a leader is not about being right or wrong. You know, being a leader is about, you know, being able to make tough decisions and know that you're going to back them regardless of the outcome. And that's a really hard thing to do at times. You know, and I make mistakes every day. I make mistakes in my business, commercially, creatively, every day, even now. But that's part of growing and learning, and you have to just, you know, I tell my guys every day, like, it's okay to make mistakes. That, you know, that's part of life. If you learn from them. Absolutely. And I think that, you know, we live in this era, live in this life now where particularly people that, you know, I've got people that are growing and they're taking more and more responsibility and autonomy, and I'm trying to educate them about what it means to be a good leader and being able to motivate people. And, you know, ultimately to be a good leader, you have to have unbelievable people skills. Yeah. You know, and I would say that I spend 60 to 70% of my time just having conversations with the people around me. Look, it's easy to hire people to tell them what to do.
Yeah.
It's really hard to hire people that tell you what to do.
Mm.
And I'm at that point in my life now, in my career, where that's what I'm doing. I'm bringing people around my table to tell me what to do.
Mm.
And they have different skill sets to me.
Yeah.
And that's truly a challenge for myself. You know, yes, they know I'm the boss, or yes, they know that it's my company or my restaurants, but I'm hiring you because I know that you bring a certain skill set to the table, and I'm backing you and I'm giving you that autonomy. So challenge me.
Yeah.
And challenge me in the right way, you know, and that can be in the kitchen too. You know, I've got, you know, an unbelievable group of senior chefs, head chefs, executive chefs, sous chefs. Speak to me.
Yeah.
You know, challenge me. Like, let's challenge each other. You know, and that was a learning curve for me, but I think it's also about timing.
Yeah.
You know, I never would have done that 5 years ago, but now is the right time to do that. And I'm enjoying that as much as I did being on the tools 5 years, 6, 7 years ago.
You talk about growth, and, you know, when I was doing a lot of my research on you, it was, you know, bad boy chef. You know, how do you think you've changed from the start of your career to now?
I hated the bad boy tagline, to be honest with you.
Where did it come from? Just from
press and media. I think, you know, I was extremely young when I opened my restaurant. You know, my image was tattoos, Nottingham, you know, suspended from school, etc. Did I have that kind of young attitude on me when I first opened? Absolutely. And was that probably 50% protection and trying to be, and the other 50% slight arrogance? Probably. But I think everyone needs that. You need some level of ego to succeed.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that I got painted in a certain way, and, you know, it was disappointing at times for me because I felt there was much more substance to me. And I think the more I got provoked or poked by that, the more I put my defenses up.
Yeah.
But at times it also worked for me, right? It
Yeah.
was kind of a selling point, and I had to find the balance. And I think that, you know, I'd like to think that anyone that's taken the time to get to know me properly as an individual would hopefully say, that I'm an honest and down the line person, but I am more rounded than you would expect. But yeah, I fucking hated the bad boy thing. I definitely got to a point where I've never probably actually said this ever personally, like on an open platform. You know, like people talk about mental health now, and, you know, it's obviously a big topic. You know, particularly when I first opened my restaurant, I felt very upset by the way I was treated at times by my own industry, particularly. And yeah, I found that tough to navigate, and it made me very introverted, and I kind of isolated myself on purpose after a few experiences within the industry. And I don't, you know, and I think that's still stuck with me today. And it's taken me a long time, a decade, I think, to actually be truly accepted. You know, I think I've learned that, and I'm okay with that now. I'm very comfortable with that. And I think actually what it did do, the positive I did take away from it, is what we talked about previously, is that with people that come and work for me now that are young, I only want them to go on and do great things.
Yeah. And
I've always said I've never been the most talented chef in the room, and I won't be. But I had other factors in my makeup. There's a reason that I am where I am today. And, you know, when I have a talented chef pass through my kitchen, or I look at them and I hope that working alongside myself, that they take some of what I can offer, you know, and I only want them to go on and do great things.
Talent only gets you so far, doesn't it? You know?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the end goal, the product, is pushed on you so much. And very rarely is the process focused on.
Yeah.
And I think that's the educational bit that we need to really work on, is like making, you know, I've said all industries, we have a responsibility to educate these people properly about what the actual process should look like, feel like, and be like. And if that means a little bit of short-term pain for all of us, then we should accept that and take that upon ourselves.
Definitely. You know, from working with Tom Aikens to get up so young and move all the way to New York, that's such a brave move.
I was very fortunate with every chef that I worked with. I think eventually I earned their respect, and then ultimately when I decided it was time for me to move on, they were all very helpful in that respect. So Tom, I remember telling Tom, look, I want to go and see other things.
Yeah.
And, at first he was a little bit like, why?
Yeah.
But then I think he knew that I was going to. And then he was like, he took it upon himself to say, well, you should go and work for this chef.
And who was that?
Thomas Keller in America.
Thomas Keller.
So I had the French Laundry in California and per se in New York. And he personally wrote to Thomas and said, look, I have a young boy with me. I think he's worthy of a spot in your kitchen. Because back then, obviously, I think French Laundry and per se were probably like, on paper, probably in the top 5 restaurants in the world.
Wow.
Thomas is an unbelievable restaurateur and chef. Like, honestly, one of the most humble individuals I've ever met. His whole ethos and what he's created for me is a legend, and I don't say that lightly. He obviously reached out, and Thomas said, okay, let's make it happen for him. So we went through the visa program. He had to sponsor me.
Wow.
I got the visa, and then, it was pretty much, I got on an airplane. Again, I remember my parents actually dropped me at Heathrow, mum full of tears. And,
Oh.
and I think, I'd always had this thing where I used to tell mum and dad, I'm going to make you proud. And I don't know why it was in me like that. I felt like I owed them something.
Yeah, who are you? It feels to me like everything you do, you're kind of proving something. Is it proving yourself to others or?
I think it's a bit of both.
Yourself?
I think it's a bit, I think being honest, it's a bit of both.
Yeah.
I think I just wanted to succeed. And I think particularly with my parents, it was because I know how much they'd given me. As I was getting a bit older, I realized the sacrifices they'd made.
Yeah.
Just to take us on holiday once a year, or get me the new trainers that I wanted, or I starting to understand it. And I remember when I flew to America, like I was fucking petrified, being honest, I remember Tom telling me before I left, like, don't let me down.
Yeah.
Like, you're going on my reputation. You need to do all of these things, work how I taught you, be respectful. But then when I went to work with Thomas, it was the level of professionalism that and standards he had within his kitchens was like nothing I'd ever seen.
Was it a calmer environment because of that?
Yes, in some respects.
Yeah.
But everything, right? You had to be clean shaven every day.
Yeah.
And if you weren't, they'd send you home. Your shoes had to be polished. Your hair had to
How'd
be...
you polish Crocs?
Birkenstocks. No, but it became more about, and I think it's the same in sport, right? It became more about how you represent your entirety of yourself, not just you as a chef.
Yeah.
And I definitely said I became a man when I moved to America and New York because, it was everything, how you talk to your peers, how you carry yourself, and the environment and the standards that he drove. And the fear, I always said the fear within that restaurant came from letting your peers and the restaurant down by making mistakes. That was the only fear I had, of not being good enough to be there. Not fear of being shouted at, or it was fear of am I good enough to be here?
And has everyone in the kitchen got the same mentality?
Yeah, that I never worked with a group of individuals when I worked in New York that were just, there's so many now that have got their own restaurants all over the world and they're doing their own thing, or even if they ventured into something that was slightly different, whether it was they wanted to own a chain of bakeries or whatever, they've all gone on and done very good things. And I think that's because, I remember my time at Per Se is my most fondest of all of my journey. And if I could have my time back, I would have stayed longer with Thomas, because I honestly can say that what I learned about myself there in terms of how to conduct yourself. And I mean, it shaped my restaurant the most today. It shaped story and how we try and operate and work. And, I look back and I made mistakes in the early days of Story just because of the pressure I was under as an individual. But yeah, if I could sit with Thomas now in a room, I'd just say thank you for giving me the opportunity to work for him.
So do you think it's to be respected, you have to train with the best? Or is that just something you personally want to do to, as you say, learn certain skill sets in different areas?
Yeah, I think you're always a product of your environment, right? Even from the very first moment you're born, I've always said the two biggest factors in your life are where you're brought up and who brings you up, and you don't control them, right? So I think from the moment you step into life, your environment shapes who you are. So I've always said, I think it's so important, whatever industry you're in, that the more demanding and high performing the environment you put yourself in, the bigger the reward and the outcome will be.
Yeah.
It's very easy to get comfortable in a position and stay there. I constantly wanted to challenge myself through my journey of getting to owning my own restaurant. And then I carried that on once I had my own restaurant. So, character building is important.
Yeah.
So going to the other side of the world, seeing
yourself out of your comfort zone.
Absolutely. Seeing a different culture, different way of living, being away from your loved ones. It's all character building. It's all things that you need to accept emotionally, not only your day-to-day job and wanting to be better at that. You need to make sure that you're constantly challenging your whole being.
If you want to be elite.
Yeah, for sure.
For anyone listening, how do you go about creating that environment of excellence?
You need to be stubborn with the vision and flexible with the details. So, I always had a very clear vision of what I wanted my environment to be like. But then in terms of creating the culture and the standards and the details, I think you have to be flexible because they can change and they can move. But I think you have to set certain standards that have to be accepted and accepted only. And I think when I think back to like working in New York, particularly with Thomas, them standards were, non-negotiable, but like everything, like your arrival time, the way you were dressed, being clean shaven. Like, does being clean shaven or having a beard make you a better cook? But fundamentally, no. But does it create an environment where you understand that there is a standard, full stop? And if you don't reach that standard, you don't deserve to be in the environment. And, it's slightly military, but I think that there's a reason that the military have these kind of principle standards and hierarchy. And I think that there's transferable skills in any industry. And look, ultimately, you have to, as I said, you create an environment that becomes self-select, because when you step into it, you very much learn quickly whether you belong there or not, or whether you choose to belong there or not. And, as I said, it's easy for you to conduct that behavior, but it's harder to get a group of people to do it.
Yeah.
And I think that not making allowances part is really tough sometimes, because, you have to make examples of people at times, because ultimately you're sending a message to the bigger picture and the wider goal, which is like, this is the standard of our environment. Yeah. And if you don't want to meet it, that's okay. Because there's another environment you can go to where the standard is slightly lower. And maybe that's the right environment for you. And that can be tough at times. And I've seen it myself, and I've witnessed it, and I've been part of it. And, like I said, I was driven by not wanting to disappoint that my environment that I was in, particularly with Thomas Keller, was that I want to be good enough for this standard environment. And you translate that into your day-to-day life.
Yeah. Have you ever been taught a lesson and been thrown out the kitchen?
Yeah, several times I fell short, but I think that's also about learning. And, I remember, so at per se, you worked very hard to get on service. That's like the ultimate goal.
So what service?
So like showtime, like between the hours of when customers are in and you're cooking directly for the customer. You start every chef.
Isn't that horrible? Isn't that like taking a penalty? Isn't that the most stressful part of the job?
Essentially, yeah. And it's, you work very hard. You start in the commie kitchen, which is essentially the whatever level you come in at. Thomas has a rule that you start there. So you understand the mechanics of his restaurant and his kitchen.
Of that kitchen, yeah.
And then, I think probably took me about 5-6 months to finally get up into the service team, and obviously extremely nervous. And then you start on.
That's not a long time for an 18-year-old boy, though, is it?
Yeah, but I was one of
the best restaurants in the whole of New York. And
I used to just stay behind until they told me to go home, because when you're in the commie kitchen, you would start at 6 a.m. but you would leave at like 5 p.m. But I used to just stay, and I'd find a way to stay. Like I'd help another chef just do something because I wanted to watch and see. And the executive chef at the time, Jonathan Benno, would be like, "Why are you still here?"
Do you ever look back and think, like some rock stars have said, we're selling out stadiums, but the most fun times were when we were going to the local pub in front of 4 people, we were on the road starting out.
Like I said, working my career leading up to owning my own restaurants, I have some of the most fondest memories.
Yeah.
And, like I said, like I remember like being called up to the PM team to do service at Per Se. And I was just like, like that was a big moment for me in my career and growth. And, I think a little bit of that lacks now in the youth today, is they don't have that same feeling and respect around certain industries. And, I remember going on and I remember plating my first dish in a 3 Michelin-starred restaurant that was going out to a diner. I remember silly things like Robert De Niro's eating tonight, or I remember when Samuel Jackson ate, because they all would come in the kitchen. And, I was 18 years old and I was living my dream, and I was cooking in a 3 Michelin-starred restaurant. It was everything that I ever wanted to do.
Are you peeking like through the hatch, like he's eating my steak right now?
I wouldn't even dare. But no, but I felt, do you know what it was? I genuinely felt like I was part of it. And I was like, I was plating that dish and they were going to eat it. And that I felt like I was winning. I felt like I was making progress. But there's always setbacks. The thing that you never wanted to happen per se was to be kicked offline. So like when you're on service, is be told to get off service because you're not doing a good enough job.
Oh God.
Yeah. And it happened to me in my time there. And I actually remember going home and like I smashed up my room. Like I was like in tears.
What did you do that was so bad?
I just gave up some radishes that weren't hot enough.
My God.
But it was, when I look back, I had a Jonathan Benno, the executive chef at the time, and I know he wouldn't mind me saying this, he's probably the most disciplined human I have ever met. And I'll be honest, I think it took my whole duration of being there to truly earn his respect. And I remember when he kicked me offline and, there was some choice words said and the volume was very high. And I remember walking to the changing room to get changed to go home. And honestly, and it sounds so silly, right? But I was literally in tears and I was like, I fucked up and I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But I just knew that I had to go home. I had to go back in the morning. I had to go back to work and I'll face the music. And I remember arriving the next day and he pulled me separately into his office. And it's such an amazing setup there. It's in the Time Warner building in Columbus Circle. The restaurant is stunning. And I remember him we had a long conversation and he reminded me of the standards of being here and what it meant. And he said, you're going to go back and you're going to work we had a separate kitchen that just did like the private functions. So you're going to go and work back there for a few weeks.
Was that your punishment?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately it was, right? Because for me, it was taking a backward step from so hard of where I worked to get to. And I went back and it's about character building and, essentially waited. And eventually I went back onto service and then I moved sections. And I remember my closing weeks out at Per Se, and it's the small things, but Chef Benno was very big on like only certain ingredients would be touched by sous chefs. So whether that was truffles, tuna, wagyu, whatever it may be, the really premium ingredients, it was about the respect for them. I remember my last week with Chef Benno, and I wasn't on a section because obviously I was leaving. My visa was coming to an end and I was going to have to leave the restaurant. And he was like, Chef, this week you're just going to work with me. I was like, okay. God. And every day we would stand next to each other and we would dice tuna together or work with foie gras. And I hope that was his way of saying like,
thank you.
Yeah, you passed the test. Like you gave everything while you were here. And you know, I think about them times, and I'm very fond of them. And I hope now, you know, we don't speak that often, but small things like, I hope now he looks hopefully and sees what we've achieved and has a little smile to himself. And, you know, because as I said, I wasn't the most talented chef in the room, but
So have you never found it natural? Did it come, you know, some people like have a natural ability. Like for me, I can only make what I can make. You know, a shepherd's pie, a lasagna. I've forgotten how to make a lasagna. But
I think there was elements.
Not creative.
There was elements of my makeup that was natural. You know, I was very dexterous. So in terms of like the knife skills and the like, you know, I was very disciplined. So like, you know, running a section and taking ownership of my bit, I was very good at. But when I say I'm not the most talented chef in the room, what I meant is that, you know, I've got an executive chef now who is extremely technical with food, and we have a great relationship because I'm more around the product probably and the narrative behind it and how I want it to truly feel at the end.
Yeah.
But in terms of the technical ability, would I say that there's elements of his makeup that's more talented than mine? Yes. Hopefully my food and ultimately my restaurants and accolades will
speak for themselves.
But I think what I'm getting across is that the big moments in my life and definitely the big challenges and the setbacks, what it came down to actually was about my attitude, my work ethic and my application. And that's what saw me to the next stage for sure. And, you know, that moment with my time in America was most definitely that. But it's funny because my next big moment when I moved to Noma was for different reasons, because I think then I was still learning about myself. I didn't truly know who I was yet. I was still a boy.
Yeah.
You know, yes, I became a man in terms of, you know, I'd moved to a different country. I'd learned a different skill set around life and what it meant to work in an environment of that level and keep them standards. But, you know, emotionally and maturity wise, I was still most definitely a boy.
Yeah. After New York, you moved to Copenhagen to work in Noma, which while you were there, it was classed as the world's best restaurant.
Again, I found myself there through, so one of the sous chefs that worked at per se had gone to become the head chef at Noma. He reached out to me and said, I'd like you to join the team. I know you're not a per se anymore. I was back in London at the time. And I said, wow, okay. I thought about it for about 30 seconds and said, yeah. You know, being really honest, I didn't know too much about the restaurant at the time. It wasn't in its infancy per se for them because they'd been going for it, I think about 6 or 7 years, but it was in its infancy in terms of it just really hit the global stage of this restaurant, and René, the chef, is the real deal and the kind of shaping the future at the minute. Mm-hmm. So I went with kind of like open expectations, and I think this is where I entered a different stage of my life where I realized that René Redzepi for me, in terms of what he stood for as a chef, his unbelievable stubbornness and self-belief of what he wanted to create, I've never seen anything like it.
No.
No.
In what way?
He had such a clear vision that he was never going to come off that track about what he believed food was and his restaurant should be. And, you know, I'd never really seen that before. You know, I'd never really seen, you know, he was in his own stratosphere in terms of the way he looked at food and what, you know, how much he backed the province of where he was and what that truly meant. And, you know, the other chefs I'd worked for, their foundation of their cookery was still very much classic. Yeah. And had obviously been passed on. Mm-hmm. He was just rewriting his own fucking book, man.
I think it's so inspiring being around people like that.
And
it's really motivating, isn't it?
He didn't care. No, he was like, don't like it, fuck off. Like, this is how we're doing it. And he's like, I don't care where you've worked, where you've been before. If anything, they'd almost use that against you at times. Yeah. And yeah, he was just, I mean, that's why Noma became known as the best restaurant in the world for a long time. It's why it's shaped the future of cooking globally. It's why now the whole Nordic region is back on the map in terms of food and at the forefront and has been for a long time. And, you know, he will go down as, you know, there's probably 5 or 6 legends of our industry that will go down forever. Wow. And he's one of them for sure. But that also at times made him extremely difficult to work with.
Yeah.
And I don't think he'd mind me saying that. Like the demand that was put on you was big. You know, there was 60 chefs in the kitchen. 80% of them were there as stagiaires, so working for free, just for the opportunity to be there. There's a very small percentage of us that were paid chefs. And obviously all the responsibility was pushed on us.
Yeah.
So that was a different dynamic to try and navigate and work with. And the food style was obviously very unique and very different.
What were you making?
You know, everything was very different. He found acid, and so, you know, typically, classically, you would always find acid through citrus, right? So when you were...
I think when acid.
So like when you wanted to like lift a dish, you would particularly use like lemon juice or things like this classically to lift something. No citrus was used really with René because it didn't grow typically in Denmark. So we would use vinegars, we would use different types. So a lot of pickling and fermenting and completely different way of looking at things. And yeah, just like I said, like he was a genius.
Wow.
And I feel very fortunate that I got to spend some time there. It wasn't my most enjoyable time in kitchens, to be honest, but I think I was a little bit jaded leaving Thomas in America. I really, as I said, I wish if I had my time again, I'd have stayed there longer. But there were times when I worked at Noma with that team and René and the wider team, they had a great team, where I really understood that I was seeing something special and unique.
Because you said before, like a bit of short-term pain for the end goal is worth it. And I think, you know, me sitting here listening to your story, working with these 3 incredible chefs who've all taught you something different and how to better yourself, which obviously gave you the courage to open your own restaurant.
Yeah, and I think it's funny, isn't it? I think going to Noma was because of the type of restaurant it was, and going at the time where I was in my career. You know, talk about timing and perfect storm. I said it. You know, it gave me the self-belief that okay, if he can do it, I can.
Yeah.
And I didn't have a plan. I didn't know where my restaurant was going to be, what it was going to be. Like I had a rough idea of what I perceive food and hospitality to be now. But it was really it really rubbed off on me. And, you know, I've seen maybe René once or twice since I've left just like top 50 in the world or different events. Spoke very briefly through social channels, but, you know, he's gone on to become an icon. And, you know, I think what he's done there and how he constantly reinvented himself. And I think, as I said, his pure, I call it stubbornness because I think tenacity. It was. Yeah, just everything, you know, he was tenacious and he was just, I remember one evening he came to me and when I say evening, we used to do every Saturday, he used to call it projects. And anyone that listens to this that's been in Noma will know of this, or in the industry would have heard of it. And essentially each chef that worked on a section or was responsible for a section, you would take it in turns each Saturday between you. You would create your own dish. And you could do anything you wanted. And René would join. And this was after service on a Saturday. So it would start around 1:30 in the morning. You've probably worked 80, 90 hours by this point, and would go until, honestly, like 3, 4 in the morning, create the dish. You would explain it. All of the chefs would eat it. And then you'd talk about it. What was good about it? What was bad about it? What did you learn in the process? It was very good because it made you realize, okay, what is my food as a chef? My food, not someone else's. What is my food? I remember one night, projects had finished. We were cleaning up. It was probably around 3 a.m. And René came to me and he had like 12 eggs, all different eggs from different birds. And he was like, let's cook these and try them.
My God.
And I was like, what? So let's fry each egg and eat it. And let's talk about what we taste.
Do they taste different, eggs?
Yeah. Yes. Like different levels of like fattiness and salt, and depending what type of bird it was and etc. But I just remember going home that night and I was like, I just stood and ate like 8 eggs in a row or whatever, fried at 3:30 in the morning in the dark, pretty much with
Was he trying to break you there or what? What was he doing?
I don't know. He definitely gave me tough love, that's for sure.
I couldn't eat 12 eggs in a row.
But you know what it was? I think that what rubbed off on me in that moment though was that he will never be satisfied as a human, ever. And I think also what I learned though, that he's really comfortable with that. And there were other moments in my time with him where I was like, you're never going to be satisfied, ever.
So how do you define success?
It's a good question. As I've got a little bit older, I think that now I look at success about the relationship I have with myself, my peers, my family, and my loved ones. And that if I can look in the mirror and be honest and say that I give them my all to all of them elements day in, day out, that for me is success. But like, I want to have 3 Michelin stars. It's all I ever wanted. Like from the moment I landed in London and I saw truly what kitchens gave me as an individual and how it changed my life, I was like, I am not going to stop until I get fucking 3 stars.
And how are you going to do it?
You just got to keep showing up, man.
Okay, so for anyone who doesn't know, what is a Michelin star and how does it work?
It's an award of excellence, right? It's, the guide goes back for many, many, many years, and it's I think it was always alluded to as a very, very romantic thing. There isn't really a syllabus. It's a board of inspectors that judge you secretly throughout the year, and they basically decide whether you're worthy of a
So
Michelin
you're not
star.
filling in a form, I'm going to apply for a Michelin star.
No,
you get chosen.
Yeah, you don't apply.
Okay.
I think they're obviously extremely knowledgeable and know exactly what they're looking for. I fell into this world of the romance of Michelin. Marco Pierre White was my hero.
I love Marco.
Yeah, and I
did a show with him and
I just fell into this love of, that is the pinnacle of success for any chef. And anyone that tells you otherwise is full of shit. It's a mark of excellence that goes back so many years. And it's that beauty and beast of, because there is no syllabus, because you don't really know, or you're trying to still figure out what it truly represents and means and how you get there, and that's why I say, how do you get it? You just keep showing up. I absolutely love my restaurants, and I love my job, and I love being a chef, and I love working with other great people now. And, we just keep showing up and we try every day to be better, not only as a chef and cooking, but as a restaurant, and being hospitable to people and creating an environment that when you walk in, the moment you step foot in Restaurant Story, for example, you are completely immersed by how much we love what we do.
Yes.
And we want to create an experience for you that lasts forever and that you talk about for years to come. And that means that you have to be 24/7, 7 days a week, mentally on that. I remember when I got my first star, I was very young and it happened very quickly. And I think Story had been open maybe 5 months.
Wow.
I think we opened in the April. And I think we got it in the September. So obviously very quickly.
We haven't even spoke about Story yet.
Yeah, I know. Sorry.
We're getting to that.
but just on the Michelin, how you get it, I think it comes back to the other bit, work really hard, believe in yourself, learn your craft properly. And then when you eventually step out and you do you, completely believe in yourself. And, that's what I did. And, I've obviously reaped the reward from that by believing in them principles.
I think that probably why it means so much to chefs in general, the Michelin award, is because the Michelin star is because it's kind of celebrating an authentic form of yourself. It's kind of saying you're good enough, what you're doing as an individual. It's not like who makes the best apple pie or who makes the best steak.
That's a really, really eloquent way of putting it. And no one's ever said it like that. And I agree with you because you're marking yourself, right?
Yes.
And it's not against anything else.
No.
And that's probably what is the beauty and the pain altogether. Because, and I always say this, what people also forget is, and I used an Oscar as an example, because, and you can win an Oscar, right? But it's yours forever. Doesn't matter what movie you do after, whether you do one movie or 1,000 movies. And it doesn't matter if that movie's great or rubbish.
Yeah.
You're an Oscar-winning actor.
Yeah.
Where for us, every year they can take them off you.
No way.
Yeah, you have to keep your Michelin stars. They're not.
Oh my God. I thought that was once you've got it, that's it.
No. No. So many, and what Michelin do, which obviously I think is
harsh.
in part is part of their integrity, though, is that, of course, every year when new stars are awarded, it's very much promoted and celebrated. But at the same time, every year there is a group of restaurants that lose stars and they take them away. They obviously don't promote that as much.
Yeah.
Because ultimately it can be damaging to your business. But yeah, every year.
Oh, imagine taking that star out your window.
Every restaurants lose stars. Every year restaurants lose stars, and that because you have to upkeep the standard year in, year out.
Is it a pressure?
Do you know what? I think I've always said we put pressure on ourselves. I've never seen it like that. And I've always been honest. I don't feel more pressure having Michelin stars.
Yeah.
Every day we're asking ourselves the questions personally. So, I'm my own biggest critic. That idea of suppressing success.
Yeah.
That's something that's within me. But I think that, for me, I set out on a journey and I want to complete the journey, and that's something that was within me, and we'll keep showing up every day, and we'll keep working hard, and but ultimately you've got to enjoy it and love it as well. I think that's the bit now that I've got slightly more relaxed about. I love my restaurants and I love what we've done, and I love working with great talent and great people, and watching them excel is massive for me. I've got people with me that started, pretty much my number 2 in the whole company now is a lady called Ursula. She started with me 10 years ago. She started as a reservation. She ran the front desk for me.
Oh my.
And now she's essentially, she's director of operations. She pretty much runs the company. And that journey of 10 years and what we've been through and how much we've grown together, and to see her now and what she's achieved and what she's done, I obviously feel immensely proud. And the restaurant wouldn't be what it is today without her. And it's things like that I probably hold as much importance to now. And, there's probably another 7 or 8 individuals that I haven't mentioned that personally, but they're all, I look at them all and I'm extremely proud of what they're achieving. And I know they're going to go on and achieve great things, and some hopefully with me and some maybe without. But as long as if I've helped them along the way and given them something, I'll take that. So, but yeah, the environment we've created is ultimately, we want an environment where every day we're trying to do better.
You opened your first restaurant at the young age of 26, which is just bonkers. And it's still open now and still hugely, hugely successful story.
The premise was simple. It was, I wanted to open a restaurant that ultimately told my story.
Yeah.
And on broad strokes, it was about everything, like where I'd worked, what that influence was, my upbringing, everything, and what I believed a restaurant experience should be like and feel like. And that's obviously evolved over the last decade. But I think, it was what I've done is, I constantly suppressed success. I constantly reevaluated myself, and I constantly gave everything I could to the environment. Only recently we closed the restaurant with it having 2 stars for a year to build a second floor, and we wanted to change the experience a little bit.
Does that not affect the stars? Can you get can you get a star taken off you while
when we reopened very recently, obviously I think they came and visited pretty quickly, and we kept our 2 stars in the guide this year, which obviously was a huge achievement for the team. But I think it was, story for me has been it's my life's work. So, it's something that obviously I'm immensely proud of. And, as I said, 11 years, we keep showing up and we keep giving our all. And, we've got an unbelievable group of customers now that have been coming for many, many years. And we get people from all over the world coming to visit, which is amazing. And, there isn't a day that I don't walk into my restaurant and not feel grateful for what we have. And, to have gone through that journey from building it from the ground up, literally it was a Victorian toilet block when we took the property and then we knocked it down. We excavated, we built, and then we built again. And to go through that whole journey and to be here today. And I went through a period in my life, probably like 2016, 17, where probably never would have admitted it at the time, but I think I was probably extremely burnt out. And, you know, I was showing up, but probably not quite in the right way.
What do you mean by burnt out?
Being painted a certain way by the media, constantly trying to suppress success and want more, and lots of things, the sacrifices that I'd made. And, you know, I had, you know, other issues with like trying to buy out shareholders and that whole strain of running a business day in, day out, and the money. And, you know, I'm not saying I lost myself, but I think I probably didn't have enough guidance around me at the time. And, you know, I was fortunate enough to navigate through. And, you know, I feel better off for that experience because I think I feel differently now about things.
And at this point, did you have like a girlfriend or a support system at home, or were you like kind of feeling all these pressures and then going home and being on your own and being like...
Yeah, I think my personal life has always suffered because of my professional life. And some of that was down to probably being emotionally out of sync or not being able to communicate correctly. I spent a long period of time alone post-COVID and was going through all of that pretty much alone. You know, I think there's only a certain group of people probably that you can have them conversations with that can relate. And I think that was probably, I didn't have people around me that probably could relate to they would probably listen and if I wanted to share it, but they probably couldn't relate. And I think that's probably what held me back from communicating. When I got my journey of accolades was funny. When I got my first star, I was so young and none of the awards then existed or anything. You just basically got a phone call or you were waiting to be told. I remember sitting on a park bench at 6 a.m, like refreshing Twitter to see like, on the day of Michelin when I was 26, we got the star, I just went back to work. Told everyone well done and we carried on.
Gosh.
You know, second star, COVID had just happened. So we got told over Zoom. So it's all funny periods in life, all of that stuff. But I think it's all shaped where you know, I've always said you're right where you're meant to be. You know, Story as a restaurant and what it represents, we really know what that is now. And I think that probably, being honest, it probably took me 6-7 years to truly know what that is. And now it's about how we keep evolving that and refining it and making sure that we are keeping ourselves honest. That's really important. It's easy to not. So, you know, we work really hard on that. And again, that comes back to, as I said, it's putting people around me that will challenge me.
Yeah.
And tell me that we should maybe look at things slightly differently. And me being accepting of that.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about your signature dish?
Beans on toast. I put mustard in the beans.
Do you know what? I hate fake beans.
Yeah, it's got to be Heinz.
Got to be Heinz.
Yeah.
A fake bean is just a no-go.
Yeah.
See, I put cheese in mine.
Yeah, in it or on top?
Well, on top where it kind of goes in.
Yeah. I put English mustard in with the beans, just a little spoon.
So your signature dish at Story is the candle, and it's a one-off, never been done before, and it symbolises your childhood and growing up. Can you tell me how you developed the dish?
No, yeah. So the candle, obviously, of course, you know, was a big influence of my childhood, and my father, and bread and dripping is a very working class, you know, dish. And actually, when I was creating the dish, it's funny. I actually started out, I'd come back from Noma. So I'd gone back home and I was living at my parents' house for a few months. And I was just like trying to make the candles in my mum's kitchen. And my mum was like, "What are you doing?" Like I was, you know, in my early 20s and she's like, "What are you doing?" You know, I went down the local butcher, got beef fat. I was like buying wicks off Amazon and online. And my mum just thought I was crazy. And then when we got closer to opening the restaurant, my core team of chefs that was going to open the restaurant with me, we would meet every day in the same Starbucks and just talk about all of the food. And I was there with my pastry chef at the time, Francesca, and we were talking about how I wanted the bread to be with the beef dripping and the candle. And
there
was an elderly lady sitting on the table next to me. And anyway, so I'd gone through like all of the work with Fran, and she had to leave, and I stayed behind. I got another coffee. I was working or writing away. This lady came over to me and she handed me a small piece of paper folded. And she said, I don't want to be rude and interrupt. I was listening to your conversation and I couldn't help but make me think of my childhood. And I was like, oh, that's really nice. Thank you. And she said, when we used to have bread and dripping when we were children, my dad always used to serve it with pickled celery or fresh celery, I think she said. And I was like, oh, really? She was like, yeah, because you have like the meat jelly and like the fat, and then like the celery was like really fresh. And I was like, okay. And then she just drifted off and went on her way. And I sat there for ages and I thought about it and I was like, so then obviously now we serve alongside the bread and dripping, you get 2 pots, and one of the pots is like horseradish pickled celery relish that we serve alongside. So it's like the acid and the freshness.
Lovely.
And that literally came from that one conversation I had in the coffee shop.
That is so nice.
And I always say, like, but food is so emotive and it is so romantic and it is all about how it makes you feel. And I've always said that, the most beautiful thing about cooking is that if you engage in it fully, it reveals everything you want to know about yourself. Like, I truly believe that. And, I think that's probably why I fell so much in love with everything around what we do day in, day out, is that it, there's nowhere to hide.
No.
And, it is very revealing, and it's, that's the slightly softer side of me, maybe that hopefully is in there somewhere.
It is. It definitely is.
No, I think so too.
So what do you cook at home?
If I'm ever going to cook at home, like for me, it's all about something that feels comforting and loving, right? So like one pot's like, whether it's in the winter I do a stew, or like I love a roast chicken.
Me too.
Like really simply done, loads of garlic.
How do you roast yours?
So really simply, like I like to like slice like really thin potatoes and garlic and onions underneath the chicken. Then I put the chicken on top, and then I just roast it and let all of the juices from the chicken onto the potatoes and the onion and garlic, and just eat it family style, but no tin foil. I don't cover it or anything. I just roast it really simply, like just things like that are really comforting, and the romantic side of cooking and what it brings to you and the joy. And obviously I see that in my restaurants daily, right? I love, if you break it down, particularly at Story, it's really simple. I say to my staff, if people are going to take 3-4 hours out of their day, right, to come and dine with us, and they choose to eat with us out of the hundreds of thousands of restaurants in the world, millions, and they're choosing to come here, then we owe it to ourselves and to them to give the best version of us.
Yeah.
It's that simple. And we are in such an unforgiving industry. And I remind people,
if you have a bad meal, you're not going back.
Never.
I've done that myself.
So you get one chance.
Yeah.
And I say this all the time, and you can put as much fucking shit out on social media and marketing as you want, but it's really simple.
Yeah.
Do a good job. Look after your guests, and they'll come back.
Yeah.
You just have to find them ways to constantly remind and inspire and work really hard to give the best of who you are.
So, but what really strikes me about you, Tom, is, you're not just a 2-time Michelin star chef, with multiple accolades to, signify how much of an incredible chef you are. You are a huge entrepreneur at such a young age. You've got 3 restaurants. You're running empires. You've created this huge brand for yourself, and, I've got collaborations with some of the biggest brands in the world. You want to talk me through that?
Yeah. You know what? I think the best way to start this, though, because I think it's really important for people to understand is, and I think Michael Jordan probably said it the best when a lot of people obviously asked him about his trainer, right? The Jordan, the shoe, is the only reason every kid in the world wanted to buy a pair of Jordans is because of what he did on the court, right? If he was scoring 3 points a game and not really playing well, no one's going to wear his shoe. So I think it starts from there. I think, I thought about, ultimately building out the brand and what I've gone on to do. It has to be a reflection of the standards you keep day in, day out in your own world and your own business. So, I think that has to be at the forefront. That has to be the nucleus of everything else, right? So I've always said that the reason that any opportunity that's ever come on my table is because of what we do day in, day out at the restaurant and the standards that we upkeep. And I never wanted to be defined by my restaurant. I felt like it was in some ways kind of a shallow existence. It's like, okay, but there's more to you than that, right, Tom? There's more substance. And what is that? And, you know, what is your ecosystem that you wanted to create and who did you want to work alongside? And I think one of the biggest drivers was that I realized that actually working alongside other great brands and creatives is that you learn a lot.
Yeah.
You know, and I've been so fortunate over the years and that, you know, I've amazing relationships with amazing brands. You know, we've worked with Rolls-Royce for almost 8 years. Audemars Piguet we worked with for 7 years, working alongside Birkenstock at the minute. We've got relationships with Formula One, with Wimbledon.
That goes back to you want to be a winner, I guess.
Yeah, and I think it's, you know, it's about aligning your integrity, right, and your moral compass with, you know, I was very big on, you know, if we're going to work alongside others, they have to have similar integrity and similar aspirations and standards, because otherwise, what are we doing it for? And that always came before the commercial decision. And I think that's also important. You know, I never took a job or I never worked alongside a brand based on commercials.
Yeah.
As successful as Restaurant Story was on paper and outside looking in, the first 4 years of that restaurant, I was less than a month away from going bankrupt, purely on cash flow and learning really hard lessons in business. It wasn't till really honestly like year 5, 6, and then obviously COVID came, but it wasn't really till then that I broke through in terms of I'd got rid of the debt in the business. I'd bought back all of the shares. And then I sat there and I with my FD, who's amazing now, who works full time within the business. And I'd learned so many lessons. I just brought everyone in-house. I brought my financial director in-house. I brought my marketing in-house. I brought my brand and events in-house. I brought everything in-house. I said, we're going to control this.
Yeah.
And, you know, and then decisions don't become hard. Them decisions become very easy. Because I don't feel under pressure to take them because there isn't somebody else that's earning from them, right? And, you know, as much as, you know, again, that comes from backing yourself as well. But I think also like the age old, you know, things that, listen, I've worked really hard to get to work alongside brands too. It's not, sometimes I've been brazen enough just to ask the question, right? The answer can only be no. There's no such thing as a free hit in this life. And that's brought amazing experiences for myself and my team and has made us more rounded. We've diversified our business, which was important, you know, because we were able to create another part of our business that now purely caters towards that brand, you know, marketing perspective and how people entertain. And we have an arm of our business that doesn't interfere with the restaurants. And if you know, for example, if there's a brand that wants to launch something and they need a caterer or they want something that we can offer, then that's there for them. And, you know, I built that out over that started quite naturally. And so I'd have a brand relationship and they'd be like, oh, Tom, we'd like you to do a dinner. Okay, no problem, because we're affiliated and we're hosting some clients. So we've got people coming in from town.
Where'd you get the chefs from to do that? Are you pulling them out of your restaurant?
At first, yeah, it would be like, okay, how are we going to navigate this? Oh, well, we can take 2 from this restaurant. We can take 1 from this restaurant and we're going to hire a couple of freelance chefs. Or I've got chefs that have worked for me that haven't got work at the minute. Let's ask them. And we kind of fudged it together for the first period. And then, you know, what I realized very quickly was that actually this is an opportunity in the market in terms of, you know, every day, day in, day out, there are brands that are wanting to hold events. And we felt that we could offer a different, more higher level F&B experience that we can cater to them. And we looked at it very differently. That's client driven. So, and brand driven. If the brand wants X, we give it to them. Where in our restaurants, we do what we do because they're our restaurants and they're in our 4 walls, and you come and we give what we do. So it was about understanding that and navigating it. And then I pulled in certain individuals to come and work in that department. And that's gone on and grown. And, you know, we've been very fortunate in the last couple of years to obviously take on some amazing brands like Formula One and,
So you're doing a VIP section at Formula One, which is it right to say the tickets start from like 20 grand a ticket?
30,000 pound a ticket. Yeah. And that is,
so you can't get more high end than that.
Yeah. And it's been such amazing learning for I always look at these things as it's a learning for my own business, and to work alongside these brands and see how they are thinking about how they evolve and what the future is and different demographics and how the landscape is changing and all of them things has been amazing. And then brands that I've worked with, like, the last 20 years of my life, I pretty much lived in a Boston clog from Birkenstock. And, they kind of ended up being a chef shoe by default. Birkenstock will tell you that themselves. They didn't design it particularly for a chef. And, now to work with them and be creating a bespoke shoe for my industry. Wow. Like, that just feels so like, people talk a lot about legacy and what can you leave the industry or what can you go on and like leave your footprint in something, and
literally leave your footprint.
Yeah. And I hope that these things, hopefully, as the journey continues, that we can leave a little bit of ourselves everywhere and for the next generation and do things that we're really proud of. Ultimately, I'm really proud of all of the brands we've worked with. But I think, finishing where I began, it's come from what we've put in, the hours we've put in behind the scenes in our own restaurant, in our own brand, and what we truly wanted to represent who we are and how we work. And, as I said, I wouldn't have any of that if it wasn't for what we worked so hard for initially. And that has always been at the forefront and will remain at the forefront. But it's a really nice place to be when you see now there's opportunities for particularly for our industry and chefs, but also any industry, that if you do what you do really well, others that do what they do really well will want to be associated with you.
Yeah.
And that's something that I'm very proud of, and I know the team are too. And, we're in a position now where every day we are learning more and more about how we want to see ourselves moving forward. And, people always ask me like, yeah, but like, when did you know as a chef like that these people would work with you? And I'm like, well, I didn't. I don't think it's not about the specific talent, right? Or industry. It's the medium that pulls you together. It's what you represent. And I think that's what we learn. And, our job is to do the best we can and align ourselves with people that want to do the same.
Like-minded people.
Yeah. And, I think also that influence of social media and being able to have your own platform was that if you want longevity, and what I mean by longevity is not 5, 10, 15 years, I'm talking generations.
A legacy.
Yeah, generations, right?
Yeah. Is
that you have to create something that it's that brand and narrative and story that people really align with, It's the age old, like, if you buy a Patek or a Rolex, you pass it down from generation to generation, and how you keep it, how you keep that journey going. And I think it's the same for us. We're looking at that at the minute with our own brand. How do we keep our journey going, and how do we stay relevant, and how do we, uphold our excellence, and how do we keep working as hard as we can day in, day out? How do we keep people motivated to want to be here? And, and that's a culture thing again. It's creating not only a restaurant, but a brand that people want to be involved in, and they can see.
People believe in.
Absolutely.
I think that's one thing about your brand, is that it's so authentic. It's believable.
Yeah. And I think people work for people ultimately. That's what I've learned, regardless of what you can offer them from a monetary perspective, or people work for people. And what I mean by that is it's not just me now. When I think of my senior team, my operational team, my marketing team, like, they got to be great people too with the same ambition, because ultimately people got to want to work for people. And, I think for us now, I made a conscious effort that the next, 18, 24 months is about consolidation and refinement and making sure that we're delivering day in, day out, and that we don't grow too fast. And that takes patience and discipline.
Why didn't you want to grow too fast? Surely, isn't that a good thing? Like,
we don't want to find ourselves, we don't want to ever be caught short. I think I'm very big on that. And, you know, we're in a position now where, yes, we're recruiting constantly. Yes, we're aiming to deliver the same standards day in, day out. But when your business does grow, naturally, them tasks become more difficult.
Yeah, so do your responsibilities.
Yeah. So I think it's just about making sure we strike that balance, and that we, you know, the age old saying of like, remember why you started.
And why did you start?
I have a lot of young people. They'll always ask me like, you know, what did you want in life, or how did you know? And I say, look, you have one, for me, my view on life as an individual is you have one responsibility to yourself, and that is to reach your potential. And only you know what that is. No one can tell you what that is. No one, in my opinion. Yes, you know, you can have whatever industry, and you can have agents or coaches or teachers, or they can tell you like, oh, you're not going to do that. Yeah. Oh no, you're not good enough for that. Or yeah, he's good, but he probably won't make it. Or bullshit. Like the only person that can tell you is you. And I've always said that I think I know what my potential is, and I don't believe I've reached it yet. And then that's in many ways, but I'm working every day and really hard to do that. And that's, you know, I remember why I started, and that's because I love cooking and I love restaurants and I love hospitality and I love the industry. And that has to be at the forefront. I enjoy being as involved in the business as well, in the decisions. I enjoy being challenged. I enjoy working alongside brands. I enjoy the diversity. But when it all boils down, you know, when I think about it deeply and think about why I started being a chef and all of the things that I went through and all of the challenges, I haven't reached my potential yet. And that's something that's obviously quite internal to me and personal. But my job is to make sure that I do that. So, and do that not only by myself, but with a group of people. So it's making sure that I give clear vision and communication through that. And it's funny, this year we're going to start our first, we're going to do, so my wider company is called History, like His Story. And we're going to do like a camp. We're going to make like an annual thing. So all of the company will go away and do like a camp for 3 or 4 days and, you know, talk about, you know, we're way more than just a restaurant. We're way more than just restaurants. We're way more than just events. We're a brand, a culture.
A family.
Yeah, a family, all of them things.
Yeah.
So, you know, they're things that excite me. Like even creating that with my team excites me, and what that looks like, and how do we drive that high performance? How do we drive that, you know, retention of people that are high performers and feeling like they belong to something that's more than just, you know. But I think also as well, making people accountable. You know, they need to be accountable for what they bring to the table, particularly senior members of my team. And it's just striking that balance. And I'm still learning. Like I said, I make mistakes every day. So, you know, learning, but they're all things that really excite me.
What is your potential that you've got for yourself then?
I think it's whatever I want it to be, to be honest. Yeah, I think it's whatever I want it to be. And I think that maybe I'm still figuring that bit out a little bit. And I think
sky's the limit ultimately.
Yeah, I think you have to look at it that way. You know, I think I doubt myself all the time internally. And I think that's one thing I'd always give a message out to people is like, it's okay to doubt yourself. It's natural, you know, but it's about how you push them feelings to the side.
Yeah.
You know, and I think anyone elite will tell you they've always had moments, whether that's, you know, Harry Kane stepping up to take a penalty, whether that's Tiger Woods on the last tee, whether it's, you know, a musician that's about to go out in front of 60, 80,000 people. You all have them moments. And the strong one, you know, the strong ones, they work out how to push them feelings away. You know, it's there for all of us. You know, I have them doubts. So, you know, I think it's about channeling that. And you know, like I said, just start, right? Like we said at the beginning, just start, give your all. Yeah, just do it, give your all. And, you know, the rest will figure itself out.
The rest is history.
I guess, as they say, literally.
you know, what's coming next? You know, what would you say to that little boy from Nottingham?
For me, my journey is still going and my story is still going. And I don't know what that means. And I don't know what the next opportunity be or the next failure. You know, I've failed many times.
But it's about how you pick yourself up. Yeah.
And I just think, like I said, it's about your internal driver, right? And making sure that you're doing it for the right reasons. You know, if you're doing it just because there's a specific end goal that, you know, only you truly know if you're doing it for the right reasons. And that's why I say I was so fortunate that I found what I loved and I found my craft and my skill and I found where I belonged, because then, you know, I could have sat here today and with a very different outcome. So yeah, I think my former self, it would be like, whatever you decide to do, just make sure you're doing it for the right reasons.
Well, I thank you so much for coming on today and telling your story. I think it's a truly inspirational one. And I was so excited that you agreed to do this. So thanks again. And please get me a table and story, because I'm not waiting 3 months.
No, it's fine. It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me. And the table's waiting.
Thank you. Thanks, Tom.